I said, all right, you know, we talked about that, and a few minutes later, she said that she wouldn't have worn that outfit a year earlier because she was 25 pounds heavier a year ago. And she said, I wouldn't do that because what she said was some assholey boy would say I was the fat girl, and that would be bad for my mental health. So then you have to ask a young woman, okay, so who gets to be proud of which body and under what circumstances, and how liberating is it really if the threat of ridicule lurks just around the corner? And so to sort of tease that idea out, the idea of, you know, why we're told that our primary form of self-expression is sexiness. Why we're told, and again, you know, I think too, if all that sexiness, if, you know, the worshiping of Kim Kardashian or whatever it is, if that meant that girls were more assertive, more connected, more able to advocate, more able to enjoy, more able to control their sexual experiences, I'd say, okay, I'm old, I'm fusty, it's time for me to shuffle off, you know, but it's not. And instead, the confidence comes off with the clothes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think what's so hard is that, and right now the bummer with education is there is just the flavor of the semester where, you know, the fact that people are talking about this right now is exciting to me, but I feel like I have to hurry up because, like, by June it's going to be texting and driving. So, in the human development world, it's just really challenging. But, and again, like, media education is now, you know, even by middle school, kids are like, oh my God, media education. I've had that. So if we could change the language of how we talk about this, and here, and even, you know, 6th or 7th grade girls can say, at least like the male models, they're doing something. They're sailing, or they're on a motorcycle, or they're, you know, at least they develop some skill. They can stand upright. But they can, yeah, they can push a woman down. But there's no, and they learn very early that idea of hot and that idea of objectification. It would be different if we were all objectified in the same way, but this idea of when I'm trying to educate how tricky it is, and Peggy's book does such a good job of talking about that, even when you're hearing her interview, you can watch the girls, the young women say, you know, whether they're younger or in college, say, as they're talking, you watch them vacillate between subject and object. And they don't even see it happening, and it's just, and so that idea of staying awake and pointing that out to them, I think, is so important. But I think that watching the selfie phenomenon come up and seeing why it's so great for me to bring teens into, especially younger middle school populations, is that the girls will say, you know, it's important for me, I want to look good and I want people to like me. And what's wrong with that? And what's great is to, instead of myself, but have one of my teens that works with me regularly, have him come up and say, can I just look at your phone for a second? Can I look at your last 10 selfies? Which, you know, and I pick like really hot teen boys. So they're like, well, and to have someone look at that and say, from looking at these pictures, I just have no idea who you are. I don't have any idea what you're interested in. I mean, I know that, you know, the chin tilt side. I know you like the left side of your face, and bikinis are really fun. But to have someone not shaming, but say, I want to know, like when I'm connecting with someone, I want to know who they are, because I'm really after a connection. And so just this idea of, rather than pointing out what's missing, to ask for, you know, there just needs to be a larger dialogue, and without the shaming, but the objectification, the idea of being sexualized. We don't want young girls to even think about being sexual, but they're sexualized everywhere. And so if there's an empty spot and they feel like they can't talk about being sexual, being present, then sexualized is the next best thing.
Yeah, I've been struggling with that one, and I know when I see a certain pop star performing up in front of a banner of the word feminist, scantily clad in this beautiful leotard, I get a little confused, because she looks so empowered, she looks so powerful, but then if I'm emulating her, I'm not going to be getting any kind of good attention.
And one of the girls in the book speaks to that. She says, you know, I love Beyonce, and I think she's great, and but I wonder if she could say the things she said if she doesn't look the way she didn't look the way she looks, and that's confusing.
It's very.
That's
It's pretty complicated. I want to go back to that example you shared about that college student who was saying that she was proud of her body. And I know for me, part of this path to empowerment, a big part of it has been becoming proud of things that I'm told not to be proud of, like my intellect or my strengths, and also my body in certain ways. And so for me, that's been a good thing, to be proud of my body, but I see that there's also another side to it. Can you elaborate on that?
well.
What is the other side?
About is accepting your body, in honoring your body's strength, accepting what it can do, accepting that it's imperfect and that that's perfectly okay. That that's sort of a different thing. And what it's interesting because it is not to keep going on Kim Kardashian, but I was really struck when she. You know how she put out those naked selfies on, maybe you don't, I don't know, maybe you don't pay attention to everything she does, because you don't have to. I want to. And on International Women's Day, she put out Happy International Women's Day naked selfies, and she got sort of slammed, and then, the backlash against the backlash, and she said, I'm proud of my body, and I'm expressing my sexuality. And again, questioning, like, well, of course you're proud of your body if it fits the ideal. Well, that's easy enough. But expressing your sexuality, that really gets me, because I think expressing your sexuality is not about the outside. It's not about how Hot tells you over and over that how your body looks to somebody else is more important than how that body feels to you. And expressing your sexuality is something that you do either alone or with somebody else. That's about, arousal, communication, warmth, affection, touch, maybe orgasm, all these things. It is not about somebody looking at you and finding you desirable. It's not, it's about your desire. It's not about being desirable. And it's such an Orwellian idea that we've sort of fallen into. That I just think that we need to, and young women, I argue about that. One of the things that I really wanted to do in the book was give young women their voice, let them have their say, even when I didn't agree with them, argue with them. There's one girl in there who I argue with about Nicki Minaj versus Lena Dunham. And she and I are still arguing. I just had a fight with her the other day about a magazine on her college campus that featured a porn star as being the ultimate sex expert. And I said, why is she the ultimate? That's like making that teacher on Glee the expert in education. It's important to, I really wanted to talk about that. And there was a young woman too in here who said to me, well, isn't there a difference between dressing, she said slutty, dressing slutty because you don't need validation and you feel good about yourself versus dressing slutty because you do need validation and you don't feel good about yourself. And I said, okay, fair point, tell me the difference. Yeah. And she kind of looked down for a minute and said, I don't know. And I spend the better part of my life trying to figure that out, and sometimes I think it's at the expense of my own well-being. So, again, it's a very tense knot, and one that I think that we have to have a lot of compassion and generosity towards when we talk to girls, and not, I think the reaction too often is that the culture pushes girls to present as sexy and then punishes them when they do. And that is not the way to engage them in a more substantive discussion about what they want.
When I talked, an example of bringing boys into this, because they're somewhat baffled as well. And I don't want to make it about boys, but that idea that we need to bring them into this conversation, and they are it is all of my. Aside from my teaching, I have a few days a month where I just meet with teens that just text to say, that aren't in crisis, but just, hey, I want to do a regular check-in. And it's the empirical data is amazing. For just the past 6 or 7 years, predominantly they are 10th through 12th grade boys, mostly 10th or 11th. And because they are so hungry to be not only accepted to have these conversations, but rewarded for showing up the way that we want them to show up, because they are not rewarded so much for being present and communicating and asking. And but I had a conversation with a boy who was not very sexually experienced, but he was asking a girl to the prom, and he was so frightened because he was very popular and everyone thought that he was a total player, and he was an athlete and outgoing, and he had not even really kissed a girl as far as the hookup quality of kissing. And he was in tears, saying that and he's a brainiac, he's going to MIT, and he's like, I tried to download a PDF on instructions, and I'm wondering if I could run a few things by you, but he got choked up because the only thing he could find was porn. He's like, I now know how to stick objects I didn't even know existed into my potential partner's orifices, but I want to know, what does it look like to honor her and show that I'm present, and that I love the fact that she doesn't look like Kim Kardashian. In fact, I really welcome it because then I'm not freaked out. But that lack that we're missing there, and to have I had this awesome Thanksgiving phone call from a sophomore in college, a boy. Did I tell you this? Where he said, you're my Thanksgiving thank you phone call, because I just wanted to tell you, he was not the super brainiac, he was more of an experiential learner, and he was like, I just had my first, he's a college freshman, and he's like, I just had my first, what I would qualify a hookup, which as we now know, means so many different, it means nothing, it means depending on who you're talking to, but he's like, I just had like my qualified first time hookup, and he's like, you know what, she stopped me, like 10 minutes into it, and said, I have to tell you, you're the first guy that's ever stopped and checked in with me. And A, let's keep going, and B, I want your phone number. And he's like, consent, who knew, what? Like, this really works. And so there we have it.
Can I just acknowledge how incredible it is that a high school jock senior boy was able to come up to Charis and ask her how to honor someone? That speaks a lot to who you are as a person. But I'm really glad that you brought up boys and men, because this book is called Girls and Sex, but men are often part of that too. And yeah, that's true. Sometimes. Peggy, you end the chapter that follows your time with Charis with an interaction with a boy similar to one that Charis just shared. What was your intention with doing this, and what do you think young boys or old boys or any boy can do to help this conversation keep going?
Yeah, I mean that's right. Because it's obviously not always, but much of the time when you're talking about girls and sex, you also need to talk about boys and sex, and it's really important. In that Dutch research too, there was a part where Amy Shallot, who wrote a book called Not Under My Roof, wrote that American boys that she interviewed would say that they wanted love, but they considered that to be a personal quirk, not shared by their male peers. Dutch boys said, of course you want to be in love. Of course you care about your partner. Of course you want her to, want what you're doing as much as you do. Of course she should have as good a time. My father taught me that, naturally. So there was a real difference there too, and I think boys who are learning, as you said, they're learning about sex from porn. They're bringing that into the bedroom with girls, so then that changes girls' expectations as well. So it's equally important that boys are taught about the way that sexualized images of women harm and distort their sexuality. It's equally important that we talk to them about love, respect, ethics, reciprocity, mutuality, autonomy, all these issues. I think, what Charis said at the beginning, which I have really learned is true, is that so much of the conversation that we have with kids around sex is about our larger humanity and ethics and responsibility and the way that we treat one another, not just in the bedroom, but everywhere, and that the bedroom is no exception to that. That we need to treat one another as humans. Sex is not transactional, and we, need to treat one another, whether your relationship is going to last for 10 minutes or 10 years. You treat somebody with respect, with ethics, with dignity. You have mutuality, you have pleasure, you have intimacy. These things are important regardless of the nature of the relationship that you're undergoing.
Hey, Olivia, you've done an awesome job. We were wondering, we would like to open it up for questions. Olivia's done an outstanding job.
Yes. Yay!
have some questions from the audience?
I'm sure we must.
I